Senator Bill Cassidy is with us, Republican from Louisiana. Good to see you, sir. The quote from John Kirby that we just heard, was anyone held accountable by the president directly for what happened with the withdrawal in Afghanistan? His answer, we have all held ourselves accountable. Is that enough?
It is not enough. That's kind of like socialism. Everybody owns it, so nobody owns it. The reality is that if you have a disaster like that disaster, there needs to be somebody who theoretically was in charge. And if it's as screwed up as it was, that somebody's head should roll. And the idea that we all held ourselves accountable was kind of a kumbaya moment. I'm not buying it.
All right, so 13 Americans killed, obviously, during the Afghanistan withdrawal by the suicide bomber at Abbey Gate. We spoke to one of their fathers, one of their mothers-in-law, as well. Heartbreaking interviews. Who do you think should be fired and held responsible in one way or another for their deaths?
I think that the House is trying to piece this together. I thought the report showing that the ambassador had taken a vacation the month before the withdrawal was telling. We did not have a plan for withdrawal. We ended up leaving billions of dollars of equipment and of money, and yet there was no thinking, how do we get it out of here? So maybe he was not told they were leaving. Although the Biden administration keeps on saying, wait a second, hands are tied because it was set in stone. So a lot of this just doesn't add up. Ultimately, by the way, remember the sign on Harry Truman's desk? The buck stops here. The buck should have stopped with Joe Biden. And if Vice President Harris was the last person in the room after he made the decision, maybe she gets 50 cents of the dollar.
It's interesting you bring up Harris's name because you're right. She has said that I was the last person in the room when the decision was made. A number of times Harris's report was named in the Afghanistan withdrawal reports in 2022 twice. In this new report, 251 times. Is it just a coincidence that now that she's on the top of the ticket, her name has suddenly appeared so many more times with such greater interest in her role?
I cannot speak to the committee hearings. I was not part of it, and I won't pretend. But obviously, if she's saying that she was the last person in the room, that may invite more scrutiny.
Okay, fair enough. I think about the New York Post cover, which, as usual, really drives home the point. But part of this report, during his decades-long tenure as Delaware U.S. Senator, 8 years as Vice President, 4 years as President, Mr. Biden has demonstrated distrust of America's military experts and advisors. And there was the point made that President Biden wanted American troops out of Afghanistan regardless of the high water and the potential costs. At some point, isn't the fact that we got out, albeit messy, make America safer? Our men and women in uniform are not in harm's way anymore. We're not spending billions of dollars a year on Afghanistan when the Taliban was effectively running it anyway. I get how he did it was a disaster. Was the decision itself wrong?
I'm going to dispute a little bit of what you said. Okay. We had 3,000 troops there, with our allies shouldering a lot of the responsibility and a lot of the expense. The Afghan army was doing the armed conflict against the Taliban. We had the Taliban at bay. In the meantime, the CIA had listening stations in which they could monitor all the countries around. Think of the countries that are there: Pakistan, Iran, China. Not a bad place to be if you want to kind of eavesdrop on what's happening. So I think
I'll add one more for you, right? You had Bagram Air Force Base, which was by far the closest U.S. warplanes could have ever gotten to the western part of China, where Western's nuclear missiles are and their ICBMs are. So huge strategic value there. Since the withdrawal from Afghanistan, America's foreign policy, America's standing in the world has deteriorated significantly. President Biden has staked an awful lot on trying to now get a ceasefire in Gaza, perhaps something along the lines of cementing his legacy. Reporting from the Washington Post today that seems unlikely at best right now because of Hamas. John Kirby on that. Take a listen.
We still believe that even for the the new amendments that Hamas has made, that it's still worth an effort to try to see if we can't get back into a ceasefire negotiation, but we're not there right now.
As terrible as the deaths of 13 American service members are that didn't need to die at Abbey Gate, as terrible as the hit to American prestige from the withdrawal from Afghanistan is and continues to be on the after effects, I get the feeling not only has nobody been held responsible, but nobody has learned what the Biden foreign policy does to America's standing around the world.
You can argue that Russia felt emboldened to invade Ukraine because of what happened in Afghanistan. And I'll say once more, we had 3,000 troops there. Our allies were shouldering a lot of the burden. The Afghan army was doing the active fighting. So it's not like we had to pull out or else we're going to have a lot of GI die. No, it had become much more of a calmer place. So when you retreat from that, Putin's going to decide, maybe I can just keep on pushing and the door is going to always be open. At some point, you send a message by your actions. It appears this administration sent some messages.
Well, it seems as though it was a political decision. At least that's what we've read. And the report says, and it's telling now that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden aren't running on it as a political success. So I guess that speaks volumes. Senator, it's good to see you. We appreciate it. Come visit us in studio when you're back in D.C., sir.
Will do. Thank you, sir.